I never believed in ghost stories until I came face to face with one on Devil's Curb. Welcome to Eerie Short and Scary Stories. Tonight, we're diving into the chilling legend of Devil's Curb, where an innocent curiosity led to an encounter with something far beyond our understanding. I was just 13, full of that reckless energy that most kids seem to have. You know, the kind that makes you think you can take on anything, no matter how dangerous or stupid it seems. My best friend, Hank, and I were no different. We were always looking for the next big adventure, something to keep us on edge, something to tell our friends about and watch their eyes widen when they heard it. And that summer, we heard whispers about a place called Devil's Curb. People didn't talk about it much, just a few hushed voices when the topic came up, always followed by nervous laughs. The older kids would dare each other to go there, and some would even tell stories about it. Devil's Curb was said to be a place where the strange things happened, devil worshippers, weird symbols painted on rocks, and eerie noises that could freeze your blood. I had no idea if any of that was true, but one thing was certain. The stories were enough to make anyone curious, including me and Hank. So, one evening, when the sun was starting to dip low and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink, we decided to go. We didn't even think twice. It was a small hill on the outskirts of town, not far from the woods that stretched out into nothingness. From the top, you could see the whole town laid out beneath you, with the distant hum of cars and the faint sounds of people going about their business. At first, it seemed like any other spot. Quiet, peaceful, almost picturesque. The breeze was light, the air fresh with the smell of pine and earth. Nothing about it seemed special, but there was something. We stood there for a while, just looking down at the town, talking about the usual stuff, school, sports, whatever. But as we stood there, the quiet began to feel thicker, heavier. It wasn't the kind of weight that made you feel uncomfortable at first. It was subtle. The air didn't just feel cooler. It felt wrong, like it had a different kind of density, like it was pressing in on me. It wasn't the chill you'd expect when the sun started setting. No, this felt colder, deeper, like something was watching us, waiting. I kept telling myself it was just the wind picking up, but something inside me kept nagging at me. I glanced at Hank. He was still talking, laughing, as if everything was just fine. But I saw it too, the way his eyes darted around, the slight fidgeting of his hands. He was trying to ignore it, but I could see the same unease growing inside him. We both felt it. I know we did. At that moment, I felt like we weren't just two kids standing on a hill anymore. I felt like we were standing on the edge of something, I don't know, something bigger. Something that wasn't supposed to be there. The town below, the quiet, the trees stretching endlessly into the distance. Everything felt like it was closing in on us. I remember taking a deep breath, trying to shake off the feeling. I tried to laugh it off, to tell Hank that maybe we were just being dramatic. But the laughter caught in my throat, and I could feel my pulse quicken. I looked at Hank again. His smile was gone now. His eyes were focused, scanning the area, like he was looking for something we couldn't see. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just a weird place. There was something in the air, something old, something that didn't belong. I thought maybe we should head back, but neither of us moved. We just stood there, staring at the town below, feeling like something was about to happen, like we were waiting for something or someone. And it wasn't until we started to turn to leave that I realized I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just stepped into something we were never meant to see. We decided to head down the hill, still talking about nothing in particular, trying to pretend like everything was fine. But the air was different now, thick with a strange heaviness. As we walked further, I started to notice it, this awful stench hanging in the air. At first, I thought it was just the smell of something rotten, maybe a dead animal. It wasn't the first time we'd come across something like that, after all. But this smell? It was unlike anything I'd ever smelled before. It clung to the air, heavy and sour, like decay that had been festering for weeks. I could feel it crawling into my lungs, making it harder to breathe. We kept walking, trying to ignore it, but the closer we got, the worse it got. It wasn't just the smell anymore. It was the sense that something was off. The woods, what had felt quiet before, now felt unnaturally silent, like the world had just stopped. My feet felt heavier with every step, like I was moving through mud. Hank was still a few steps ahead of me, not seeming to notice, or at least not letting on that he noticed anything. I wished I could say the same, but the feeling of dread crawling up my spine was impossible to ignore. And then we saw it. I still remember the shock of seeing those tarps. Big, dark tarps covering something large. Something that shouldn't have been there. We both stopped in our tracks. And for a second, neither of us spoke. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Just some junk. Maybe even something from a nearby campsite. But as we got closer, it was clear we were wrong. The tarps didn't hide piles of old camping gear or forgotten supplies. No, what they hid was much worse. The moment we lifted one corner of the tarp, I wish I could have just turned around and walked away. Underneath, the sight of it was enough to make my stomach turn. Animal bodies. But not just any bodies. These were mutilated, torn apart in ways that didn't make sense. The flesh was shredded, the limbs twisted at impossible angles, and the faces were... I don't even know how to describe the faces. They didn't look like anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't just death that claimed them. It was something else. Something that had gone beyond natural decay. Something deliberate. I felt a wave of nausea hit me. It was like every muscle in my body froze. Hank was staring too, wide-eyed, his breath coming in short, quick bursts. He looked at me like he wanted to say something, but no words came out. I couldn't blame him. What could you say to something like that? There was no explanation for what we were looking at. No excuse for why something like that would be here, in the middle of the woods, hidden under tarps as if no one would ever find it. We should have left then. We should have just turned around, walked back up that hill, and never spoken about it again. But I couldn't move. Neither of us could. I don't know how long we stood there, frozen, staring at those bodies. The wind was still, the air thick with the stench of decay. And then something else started to settle in, something colder, something that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't just the bodies anymore. It was a feeling of eyes on us. I looked around, but there was nothing. The woods were empty, silent, but the feeling of being watched never left. And that's when I realized something was wrong. Not just with the bodies, but with everything. The air, the stillness, the sense that we were intruders in a place we shouldn't be. It was as if the whole world had paused, holding its breath. We turned to leave, but it felt different now. I didn't want to be here anymore. But as we walked away, I felt it, the unmistakable feeling that we weren't alone. And that's when I saw her. She wasn't far from us. At first, I thought I had imagined it, but no, there she was, standing at the edge of the clearing, just barely visible through the trees. I couldn't make out her face, but I saw her outline clearly enough. A figure, tall, slender, her movements slow, deliberate. She wasn't moving toward us, but she wasn't moving away either. She was just there, watching. It wasn't the way a person watches. It was more like she was studying us, waiting for something. I stopped in my tracks, and Hank bumped into me. He hadn't seen her yet, but when I pointed, his face went pale. He didn't even ask who it was, or why she was there. He just started backing away slowly, like he was trying to avoid drawing her attention. I didn't move. I couldn't. I knew I should have run. I knew I should have turned around and never looked back. But I couldn't stop staring at her. There was something about her, something in the way she stood there, that felt wrong. Like she wasn't supposed to be real. Like she didn't belong in this world. And that's when I realized something else. We weren't just intruding on some hidden place in the woods. We had stepped into something far deeper, something far more dangerous than we had ever imagined. And whatever was watching us wasn't going to let us leave so easily. There she was, standing at the edge of the woods. I'll never forget how she looked. A woman, dressed in a white gown, as if she were about to walk down the aisle. But something about the sight of her sent chills through my body. She was just standing there, motionless. Her eyes were fixed on us. No blinking, no movement, just a steady, unwavering stare. It felt like she was waiting for something. Or maybe for someone. Maybe for us. I didn't know what to make of it at first. I tried to convince myself it was some sort of trick, some illusion brought on by the weird, heavy atmosphere of the woods. Maybe it was just a lost hiker or some local woman out for a walk. But deep down, I knew that wasn't right. There was something wrong about her. It wasn't just the fact that she was standing alone in the middle of nowhere, dressed in a wedding dress, like she had stepped out of some twisted fairy tale. No, it was the way she was looking at us. Her gaze didn't just feel like it was on us. It felt like it was through us, like she could see straight into our souls, reading every hidden fear, every dark thought. I tried to nudge Hank to get his attention, but he didn't seem to notice. His focus was somewhere else, probably on the path we were walking down, or maybe just lost in his own thoughts. But I couldn't stop staring at her. I couldn't stop the feeling creeping up my spine, telling me that something wasn't right. She was still there, still standing, her white dress almost glowing against the dark woods behind her. I felt my heart start to race, the kind of racing you feel when you know something bad is coming but you don't know what. The air felt colder, and the woods seemed eerily quiet, as if every living thing had just gone still, waiting for something. I kept looking over my shoulder, trying to keep track of her, but no matter how many times I turned, she never moved. She was still standing there, watching us, her eyes locked on mine, as if we were the only two people in the world. Finally, Hank turned around, noticing that I was acting a little odd. "What's up with you?" he asked, his voice light, like he didn't have a care in the world. He glanced over at the spot where I was staring, but when he looked back at me, he just shrugged. "It's probably just some weirdo out here. Let's go." He wasn't taking it seriously, and that made everything worse. Because I knew something he didn't. There was no way this was normal. There was no way any of this made sense. And yet, here we were, standing on this dirt road, with a woman dressed in white standing in the woods, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I didn't say anything to Hank. What was I supposed to say? He didn't seem to get it. I couldn't even explain what I was feeling, this cold sense of dread creeping up around me. So I turned away and started walking faster, trying to shake off the feeling that had settled over me like a heavy weight. But no matter how fast we moved, I couldn't shake the thought that she was still there, still watching us. I glanced over my shoulder one more time, and there she was, just as she had been, standing still, her face pale as bone, her eyes unmoving. I swear, it felt like she had been there for hours, even though it had only been a few minutes. I wanted to tell Hank, but I couldn't bring myself to. What could I say? What could anyone say to explain that? She wasn't just some odd person out for a walk. She wasn't lost or confused. There was something deliberate about her presence. Something wrong. But Hank didn't feel it. He just laughed it off like it was no big deal, as if it was all some joke. But to me, it was anything but a joke. I couldn't stop looking back. Couldn't stop wondering what she was doing out there, alone, in the woods, in that white dress. What did she want? And why was she looking at us like that? We made it to the road, and I thought maybe I could breathe again, that maybe the nightmare would be over. But when I turned around one last time, there she was, still standing there, exactly as she had been. And in that moment, I knew we hadn't escaped. Not really. We were still caught in her gaze, still trapped by whatever had drawn us here. That night, I went to bed hoping that everything I had seen earlier in the day would fade into a distant memory. I wanted to forget about the woman in white, the way she had stared at us from the woods. It felt like a bad dream, and I was certain that when I woke up, it would all just vanish, like every other bad thought or nightmare that fades with morning light. But that was the problem. I should have known it wasn't over. I should have known that whatever had started in the woods That afternoon wasn't something that could be brushed away so easily. I woke up in the middle of the night, my body stiff, my mind foggy, not quite sure what had disturbed my sleep. For a moment, I lay there in the dark, trying to gather my bearings, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe it was just the air in the room, too cold, or maybe my imagination playing tricks on me. But then I saw her. She was standing at the foot of my bed. I froze. I couldn't move. My heart slammed against my ribcage, and my breath came in shallow gasps. She didn't say a word, didn't make a sound. It wasn't even the footsteps or the creak of the floor that had woken me. It was her presence. She was just there in the darkness, her white dress glowing eerily, almost glowing in the dim light from the window, that haunting, cold light that made everything feel wrong. Her face, pale as death itself, was expressionless, just like it had been when I saw her in the woods. But her eyes, those eyes locked on me. I couldn't look away. I don't even know how to describe what I saw in them. It wasn't hatred or anger. It wasn't even curiosity. It was something much deeper, something ancient, something that had lived for far too long and had seen too much to be anything but cold. Those eyes didn't belong to a person. They belonged to something far older, far darker. I pulled the covers over my head, hoping, praying, that it was just a nightmare. Maybe I had fallen asleep and dreamed it all up. Maybe I was still lost in a haze of sleep. I squeezed my eyes shut, held my breath, told myself that when I opened them, she would be gone. I tried to tell myself that it was just my mind playing tricks, that I was just imagining it, that it couldn't be real. But I couldn't shake the feeling. Even with my eyes tightly shut, I could feel her there. It wasn't just the cold air or the darkness. It was the weight of her presence. It was like she was right there, just inches away, her eyes burning into me, never blinking, never looking away. I felt in my bones the way the air around me had changed, how everything felt suffocating, heavy, like I was caught in a web, unable to move, unable to escape. I waited. I stayed perfectly still, holding my breath, hoping she would go away. I kept thinking that if I didn't move, if I didn't make a sound, she might disappear. But the longer I stayed there, the more I realized it wasn't going to end. She wasn't going anywhere. I could feel her eyes still on me, piercing into the covers, through my skin, through everything. I don't know how long I stayed there, trying to will myself to sleep, trying to convince myself that this was just a bad dream. But the seconds stretched into minutes, and the minutes dragged into what felt like hours. Every time I thought I was safe, every time I thought maybe I had finally drifted back into sleep, I'd feel it again, the cold, the pressure, the absolute certainty that I was not alone. And then I heard something, a whisper, just a soft, almost imperceptible sound, like the rustling of a breath. But I couldn't tell where it came from. It wasn't from her, not directly. It was more like it came from the space around me, from the shadows that had already swallowed the room. I could feel it, but it wasn't enough to make me move. I was too scared to open my eyes, too scared to face whatever was standing there in the dark. I wish I could say I found the courage to turn and look, to confront whatever nightmare was lurking in my room. But the truth is, I never did. I stayed there, frozen, paralyzed by the cold terror that had sunk its claws into my chest. And when the sun finally came up, I thought it would all be over. I thought I could get out of bed, shake it off, and move on with my day. But when I opened my eyes and the light of day spilled into the room, I knew one thing for sure. I hadn't escaped. Not by a long shot. The woman in white hadn't gone anywhere. She was still there, somewhere, waiting. The next morning, I thought I had escaped it. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was all just a nightmare. Maybe it was the stress of everything. The woods, the strange woman, the unsettling feeling that had followed me home. I told myself that when the sun came up, it would all be over, that I would be free. But as soon as I saw Hank, I knew something wasn't right. He was different. He wasn't the same. At first, I thought it was just me. Maybe I was still shaken. Maybe I was projecting my fear onto him. But no, Hank was different. His eyes were vacant, hollow, like something inside him had been drained. The usual spark in his gaze was gone, replaced by something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Something broken. It was like he had seen something, experienced something that had cracked him wide open. I tried to talk to him, but he barely responded. It was like he was there, but not really there. The light in him was gone. The day dragged on, each hour stretching out in front of me like a never-ending, suffocating fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, that the shadow from last night hadn't let go, that it was following me. I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see her, the woman in white, standing there in the middle of the school hallway, but she didn't show up. Still, the unease gnawed at me, deep and insistent, like a weight pressing down on my chest. That night, I was sitting in my room, trying to block out the feeling of dread that had wrapped itself around me. I turned on the radio to drown out the silence, hoping some music would help settle my mind. But what I heard instead was far worse than any silence. It started with static, a low, crackling hum that filled the room, making my skin crawl. I thought the radio was broken, that maybe it was just interference. But then, in the middle of the static, I heard it, a voice, faint, barely audible, like a whisper carried on the wind. It was her. I knew it instantly. She called my name. I don't know how to explain it. There was something about the way she said it, so calm, so certain, like she was standing right next to me. It made my blood run cold. I froze. My whole body went stiff, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. I pulled the radio from my desk, turned the dial frantically, trying to get rid of the sound, but it didn't stop. The static kept crackling, and her voice kept calling me. I finally shut the radio off, my hand shaking. I sat in the dark, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was I losing my mind? Was it just another trick my mind was playing on me? But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I knew it wasn't just in my head. The next morning, I noticed something strange. A mark on my wrist. At first, I thought it was just a bruise, maybe from something I had bumped into. But it wasn't a bruise. It was an impression, like a hand had been pressed there. The outline of fingers, clear as day, as if someone had grabbed me. But no one had touched me, not in the way that left a mark. I ran my fingers over the impression, my heart racing. It wasn't there before. It hadn't been there when I woke up. It had appeared overnight, like the woman had left her mark on me, something to remind me that I wasn't free, that she was still with me. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The way Hank had looked the day before, the voice on the radio, the mark on my wrist. It was all connected, and it was all because of her. She wasn't gone. She was just getting started. I thought I had gotten away. I really did. After everything, after the woman in white, the whispers on the radio, and the mark on my wrist, I thought I was free. I tried to convince myself that it was over, that maybe the whole thing had been some twisted hallucination or a series of bad dreams. But as I sat there, staring into Hank's eyes, I realized something that shook me to the core. This wasn't over. Hank, my best friend, the guy who had always been there by my side, laughing at stupid jokes, getting into trouble with me, he wasn't the same. His eyes, those once bright and full of life, were now empty, hollow. It wasn't just that they looked distant. They looked haunted, and I knew in that moment that she hadn't just been haunting a place. No, she had been haunting us all along. I had taken her with me. She didn't need to stay at Devil's Curb. No, she had found a way to follow me, to slip into my life and drag Hank into hers. And now, as I watched him, I could see it. The same cold emptiness that had filled her eyes was creeping into his. She had marked him, too. In a way, she was always with us now. She never left, and I could feel it, like a dark, heavy presence lurking just beyond the corners of my vision. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell someone. But who would believe me? Who would understand? People don't talk about things like this. They just look at you like you're crazy and move on. But deep down, I knew what I had to do. I had to make it stop. I had to find a way to break whatever hold she had on us, to set us free from whatever curse she had placed upon us. But as I looked at Hank, sitting there with that blank stare, I realized that I couldn't fix it. I couldn't undo what had been done. And that's when I understood. Some things don't go away. Some things aren't just stories or rumors. So, next time you hear about a place like Devil's Curb, think twice before you explore. Because some things don't just stay in one place. If you enjoyed this eerie tale, make sure to like and subscribe to Eerie Short and Scary Stories for more spine-chilling stories from the dark corners of the world. Stay safe and stay wary.